That is how rich a really good address of this kind can be. Now I'm going to go through some of the rest of the speech more rapidly, but I would like you to go through the rest of the speech as slowly as we just went through it. So at the end of that paragraph on the top of 101, which begins the money changers, he says in the last sentence, the measure of the restoration lies in the extent to which we apply social values more noble than mere monetary profit. So here is the idea of a moral or a humane value that's more important than just somebody making money. And notice that mere. Mere is what part of speech here? It modifies profit, modifies monetary, I think. I think we'd probably call it an adverb here because it modifies monetary. Or if you want to say it modifies profit, mere profit, but mere monetary profit, I think it might, mere here might modify monetary. Happiness lies not in the mere possession of money, and here's mere again. It lies in the joy of achievement, in the thrill of creative effort, the joy and moral stimulation of work, what we would call the dignity of work, the idea of a job well done, and you're satisfied with it, no longer must be forgotten in the mad chase of evanescent profits. Why evanescent here? Interesting use of that word stylistically. Why say, what does evanescent mean? Fleeting, yes. Fleeting, not solid. Well, first of all, it's hard to make a profit these days. The whole notion is people just trying to struggle to live with the grim problem of existence, instead of this mirage of trying only to seek after profit. These dark days will be worth all they cost us. Again, the economic image. If they teach us that our true destiny is not to be ministered unto, but to minister to ourselves and to our fellow men. Now, that word minister, and here ministered to, polyptoton, ministered, what kind of profession or what kind of human attitude does ministered and ministering to suggest? You're going to minister to someone.
It's again religious imagery, because a minister is often a synonym for pastor.
Yes, it certainly could be ministering. Could it be medical also?
Yes.
Yes, it could be. Taking care of in the widest sense. Very often associated with pastoral care, religious care, but also associated with medical care, associated with hospice care. When you're ministering to someone, you are helping them. And, he suggests, not only you're helping them, but you are ministering to ourselves. In other words, the help is for you and others, collectively. Recognition of the falsity of material wealth as the standard of success goes hand in hand with the abandonment of the false belief that public office and high political position are to be valued only by the standards of pride of place and personal profit. There's a lot of alliteration here now with all those P's. It's a marvelous analogy he's drawing as well. And there must be an end to a conduct in banking and in business which too often has given to a sacred trust the likeness of callous and selfish wrongdoing. A sacred trust versus callous and selfish wrongdoing. Small wonder that confidence languishes, for it thrives only on honesty, on honor, on the sacredness of obligations, on faithful protection and unselfish performance. Without them, it cannot live. So a series of rather long sentences here, very long sentence at the beginning of the paragraph, then a somewhat shorter sentence, and then a very short sentence at the end. In other words, there's even a certain plan here in the composition of this one paragraph. Well, he goes on, look at the bottom of 101, and here he starts to use anaphora. He says, of the land and for the land, but then the task can be helped. A sentence later, it can be helped. A sentence later, it can be helped, a sentence later, it can be helped, a sentence later, it can be helped, and then a sentence later, there are many ways in which it can be helped. So in this kind of speech or address, you see that kind of use, but it can never be helped merely by talking about it. We must act and act quickly. And now we're coming to part of the speech which Roosevelt wants to emphasize, which is he's just not going to talk about this. There are things that are going to be done. There are things that are going to be done. And who's going to do them? Now that's interesting. We'll go down a little farther. He says, in our progress toward a resumption of work, we require two safeguards against a return of the evils. There must be a strict supervision of all banking and credits and investment. Did that happen in the Great Recession? To some degree, recently. Banks had to undergo what was called a stress test. A stress test physically is when you get on a treadmill and they check your heart, and I've had a couple of these and they're not very pleasant because they don't let you warm up and they ramp up the treadmill and you go until you reach your maximum heart rate, and then they say, hold that for a little while, and then they say, okay, stop, and then they check things. For banks, a stress test would be to see what all their assets were, what their liabilities were, and whether they could undergo something very serious in the financial markets. So there are all kinds of things that have gone on recently. Whether they are strict enough or not is a matter of debate, but FDR says that at this time there must be a strict supervision of all banking and credits and investments. What had happened with some of the banks? Well, not only had they closed, they went under, they failed. Oh, there was one other thing that we didn't have then. What's FDIC? Joel?
Guaranteed up to $250,000.
Yes, now it's insurance, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. If you put $250,000 in a bank and the bank goes under, do you get your money back? Yes, you do. Did that exist in the 1930s? No. If you had $200 in the bank and the bank was going to go under, what would you do? Yeah, how are you going to get there? You're going to walk slowly? You're going to amble to the bank? You're going to run. And what is everyone else doing? Running. And what do we call that? A run on the bank. Yes. And then when you get there and you're the bank owner, what might you have done? Yes, you might have locked the doors. Indeed. Anyone here see that movie, It's a Wonderful Life, starring Jimmy Stewart? It's a good holiday movie. I recommend it. It's a little sentimental, but it's good, and it talks about a man who runs a savings and loan, and he thinks somehow that he has lost a big deposit for all of the members of the savings and loan, which is a cooperative association. It deals with some of these same realities, and it has become a very famous Hollywood film for various good reasons, I think. These are the lines of attack. There must be an end to speculation with other people's money, and there must be provision for an adequate but sound currency. These are the lines of attack. I shall presently, and this is a proper use of the word presently. Presently really in English doesn't mean at present. Presently means what? He doesn't say, I am currently urging. He says, I shall, which is future tense. So what does presently mean? Soon. Yeah, it means soon. I know, shouldn't presently mean at present, but we have other words for currently, now. Presently has come to be used to mean at present, but its proper use is FDR's use, meaning in the near future. So, and I shall seek the immediate assistance of the several states. Now, there was an extra handout today, which was a couple more pages of this address. Did everyone pick that up? Did you get, all right, well, it's up there when you, yeah, that's the extra version. So I've given you what in our own words cuts out, okay? Because there's this little ellipsis points there. So I'm going to let you look over that. Do you understand? When after several states it goes ... That's a period and ellipsis points, and that means something is left out. And I have given you what is left out on that extra sheet. Did you get both pages of that? Yep, okay, very good. Then we return back to in our own words. And this is a marvelous example of presidential power. I am prepared under my constitutional duty to recommend the measures that a stricken nation in the midst of a stricken world may require. Stricken nation, stricken world. These measures, or such other measures as the Congress may build out of its experience and wisdom, I shall seek within my constitutional authority to bring to speedy adoption. Then, a kind of rebuttal. But in the event that Congress shall fail to take one of these two courses, in other words, the course that I set or a course that Congress determines to address, but in the event that Congress shall fail to take one of these two courses, and in the event that the national emergency is still critical, which no one doubted really, I shall not evade the clear course of duty that will then confront me. Confront means literally face, confront, stare at you. I shall ask the Congress for the one remaining instrument to meet the crisis, broad executive power to wage a war against the emergency, as great as the power that would be given to me if we were in fact invaded by a foreign foe. This is an astonishing sentence. What presidential powers does that imply?
He's implying that he would assume greater powers than the Constitution gives him.
Yes, that's correct, that certain things would be suspended under a kind of emergency. Did this ever occur previously in the United States? Huh? Yes, Lincoln greatly extended during the Civil War the executive power of the presidency. He suspended habeas corpus, for example, which is a very significant legal step to take. Declared martial law, as I recall, I think in Washington, D.C. for a period of time. In other words, Roosevelt is here sort of pulling the sword out of the scabbard a little, meaning you don't take a course of action that is going to vigorously address these things as I have outlined them. I will then take the next step because we are facing something which is the equivalent of a war, and I will ask essentially for war powers. Even though we are not fighting a physical battle with another nation, it is a stricken nation in a stricken world. We face the arduous days that lie before us in the warm courage of the national unity, with the clear consciousness of seeking old and precious moral values, with the clean satisfaction that comes from the stern performance of duty by old and young alike. There is here an appeal to a higher spirit, to a spirit of patriotism which has to do with meeting an emergency through acts of self-sacrifice and solidarity. We aim at the assurance of a rounded and permanent national life. And then this, we do not distrust the future of essential democracy. As if to say, by the way, if you were doubting the goodness or the essential nature of democracy, we, not I, we do not distrust it. This was a very important thing for the nation to hear at this time. They have asked for discipline and direction under leadership, meaning the people. They have made me the present instrument of their wishes. In the spirit of the gift, I take it. In this dedication also interestingly has a religious overtone. We don't think it does, but to dedicate a building very often meant originally to dedicate it to some form of deity or spirit, to really give it over to some greater cause. Today we say, well, we dedicate something that it just means you cut a ribbon and maybe there's a cornerstone or something. But the original sense of dedication meant really you were giving it over to some greater cause. We humbly ask the blessing of God. May He protect each and every one of us. May He guide me in the days to come. So this address, as well as the supplement that I gave you, which in our own words cuts out, is really worth some study, as any of these good speeches are. So as you go back through it, look for schemes and tropes, look for possible enthymemes, look for cause and effect, look for topics, look for parts of an address. Does this have parts? Does it have an introduction? Does it have a narrative? I think it does. Does it have an argument? Yes. I think it has a kind of rebuttal where he says, by the way, if Congress doesn't do this, then I'm going to ask for something that is quite stunning, but the situation would call for it. And then it has a kind of peroration, but the peroration here is not rousing. Why maybe not rousing? Not terribly emotional. Why might that be a false step? Why might he want to avoid a peroration that would be highly elevated?
I would say there's a chance that he doesn't want to raise expectations too high. If he gets everyone really excited and then the depression lasts for another 2 years, then
Well,
there
it
will be
did.
a lot of disappointment.
It did. It lasted a long time. There are those economists who say that it really lasted all the way until the beginning of World War II. So yes, he needs to be cautious. He says direct, vigorous action. He's not making any specific promises either here as such. Only that if we do this, then we go all the way back to that statement at the beginning, near the beginning of the address, is that we can have a national life, a leadership of frankness and vigor, has met with that understanding and support of the people themselves, which is essential to victory. Victory, which is again a military term for a battle or a fight. So I know this may have seemed a little like taking out the dental floss and going between the words and the paragraphs, bad image, but do that. And now Kennedy's inaugural is even shorter. And Kennedy's inaugural has many schemes in it, much alliteration, and great parallels and rhythmic uses. You can watch Kennedy's inaugural on YouTube. You can, it takes only something like 6 minutes, 5 minutes. It's very short. And study it also. For next week, we're going to be then turning to Lincoln's second inaugural, which is extraordinarily brief. Really just a couple hundred words. And also the Gettysburg Address, which is also just a few hundred words. But those two addresses by Lincoln exemplify a clarity of diction, a clearness of message, a depth and profundity of thought, while cast in language that is not bombastic, but yet elevated and quite affecting, quite moving.